Bichamo Apura Kanu Apurai Kaitnut Neye Odwirada Medinde Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akan Akwamuman Amaruka Atifi Mu Odwirafo Odwiraman Mu. Greetings to all Apurai people, meaning African black people. Today is Odwira Day, Purification Day. My name is Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akhan, Odwirafo of the Akwamu nation in North America. Within Odwiraman, the purified nation, Apurai people, African people, black people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say we thank you for tuning in to the broadcast once again. Chat room is opened up. If you have a question or a comment in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact in the chat room. If you don't have a username, you can sign up for one quickly in Blog Talk so that you can interact. If you have a question or a comment on the phone line, simply hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised, and then we can interact with you. This will be a more extended question and answer session for tonight's broadcast, so you can begin to hit the number 1 and raise your hand now if you have questions. So we have 4 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We have Akan Nanasom, ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion on Joda, which is Monday nights. We deal specifically with the Akan expression of ancestral religion on Joda on Monday nights for Akan Nanasom. Number 1, because we are Akan. Number 2, because of the misinformation that is being propagated regarding Akan philosophy, Akan culture, Akan religion, etymologies, and so forth. So we're going into detail about the nature of the Obosom, the deities, the nature of the Nananom Nsamanso, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our direct blood circles, the Okra, the soul, the divine consciousness, which is the divinity that dwells in the head region of every Apurai male and Apurai female deity that encoded within that divinity within our head region is our specific function to execute in the world, and it's also tied into that function the specific spiritual potencies or capacities we have energetically to execute our function in the world. So we're going into detail about these various things on Akan Nanasom, ancient authentic Akan ancestral religion on Joda Monday nights, including our direct ancestry from ancient Kanat, which is a title of Nubia. Our people migrated from ancient Kanat to the Western Hemisphere, the western part of the continent of Aakhuamuman a couple of thousand years ago, and reestablished the Kanat Empire, the Ghana Empire. About 1,000 years later, some of our people migrated further south towards the forest belt and reestablished the Kanat or Akana civilization in the forest belt and savanna regions. Hundreds of years later, some of our people were taken from those regions and forced into North, Central, and South America and the Caribbean, as well as Europe during the Musuo-Kesie, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. So this is how ancient Kanat people, ancient Akan people from ancient Kanat, Nubia, get to West Africa, and all the way to the Western Hemisphere. But we carry our ancestral religious practices with us in our blood circle. So the Akan tradition, as we have proven in our various books, is the Hoodoo tradition in North America. It is the Obia tradition in Jamaica. It is the Winti tradition in Suriname, and so forth. So we go into detail about that on Joda on Monday nights for Akan Nanasom. On Wednesday nights, Wukuda, Akwada, we have Egua, which is marketplace. We showcase Afurakani businesses, organizations, and institutions. Those who are serving our people in a positive capacity, but also maintaining and conveying their ancestral religious values in the context of that service to the community. So we've had a number of individuals come on to talk about their businesses, organizations, and institutions. We've also, in that vein, we have published the Obosom economic development model, which is an economic development model rooted in our ancestral religious values. It is therefore a holistic approach to economic development for Aakhuamuman people. You can download that document, free download, of course, from our Obosom economic development model page. We'll put that link in the chat room right now. You'll see the link to the document. You'll see the link to the 4-part series we did on Blog Talk examining the document. You'll also see the links to the various businesses, organizations, and institutions who have come onto the show, links to their businesses, links to the 2-hour interviews that they did with us. And part of the OCOM economic development model is our strategy, which is to starve the beast and feed the pride. You'll see that we make an assessment on a weekly basis to determine what funds we would have potentially wasted with the whites and their offspring, and then you starve the beast and feed the pride. You reallocate those funds away from the white business and direct them to the business, organization, or institution of the week. We are supporting one business, organization, or institution per week, Afro-Akani only, of course, for 52 weeks for optimal capital infusion. So when you starve the beast and feed the pride and you take $5 or $10 you would have wasted at a white business and redirect that money to the business of the week, the organization of the week, the institution of the week, that's not only a transfer of $10 in capital from our enemies to one of our businesses, but when 1,000 of our people do that, that's a transfer of $10,000 instantaneously from white businesses, our absolute enemies, to one of our businesses to allow them to expand higher within the community so that our people can have employment, expand their products and services to us, so the products and services that we have been accessing from our enemies, the whites and their offspring, with the white American businesses, white European, white Latino, white Hispanic, white Arab, Hindu, Asian, whatever it is, pseudo-Native American, our absolute enemies, we redirect these funds to our people, to one business, organization, or institution per week. So it's an optimal capital infusion. So they receive that $10,000, they expand their business, expand their products and services so they can serve us at a greater capacity. And then when we move to the next week, then they can also participate in helping to transfer funds to that business, and every week we expand that process. So you'll see that information on the OCOM Economic Development Model page. On Yauda, Thursday night, also called Yada Abada, we have Amain Sim, which is our new broadcast. We had the first broadcast of Amain last week. Amain Sim means the Asim, the affairs or issues of the Oman of the nation. Talking about Odwiraman, the purified nation, Afro-Akani people in the Western Hemisphere. Dealing with the various issues that our people are currently dealing with and our approach from a grounded, ancestral, religious, and cultural, political perspective on addressing our issues. So these are the different shows, and of course tonight we have ODWIRA, which means purification. We deal with Afro-Akani, the African ancestral religion, not just the Akan expression, but in general, no matter where we exist in the world, whether you're talking about on the continent, the various expressions on the continent, or how we maintained our ancestral religious traditions in the Western Hemisphere in the forms of Hoodoo, which is Akan, and Juju, which is Yoruba, and Vodou, which is Son and Ebe, Grigri, which is Bambara, and Wanga, which is Ovambo, and the various different traditions that we have maintained. We talk about how ancestral religion impacts every aspect of our lives. Ancestral religion, in essence, is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. Through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject, we need to repel, we need to hate, to repulse, in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions, and thus realign ourselves with divine order. The ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance are the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion. Ojira, purification, operationalizes nanason. Purification operationalizes ancestral religion. So through purification, we operationalize that process of incorporating law and restoring balance so that we can align every thought, every intention, and every action, every moment of every day with divine order. When we make mistakes, then we can engage our ritual practices to realign ourselves and get back on track with our lives so we can continue to move forward in a productive fashion, rooted in the divine function that we have been given to execute in the world as Afro-Akani people. Afurakani people only. So this is what we deal with on Ojira. We look at various expressions of ancestral religion, whether it's the text of ancient Kemet, the ritual practices of the continent, as well as the expressions that we have brought here and maintained in our blood circle. And so before we get started with that, we do have our announcement. Our conference is coming up June 24th, which is a Ptah, which is a Friday, a special Friday, Apidam Ptah, an Ancestral Observance Friday, Apidam Ptah, which is June 24th. That conference will be held here in Washington, D.C. Odwiraman Afashe. Odwiraman means the purified nation. Afashe means a festival conference coming together. We're dealing with Amaniye, Afurakani, Afurakaitni, nationism, the purification of nationalism. So we're talking about nationism from a pure, grounded, ancestrally grounded, rooted perspective, not a secular nationalism which is impotent, or a messianic nationalism which is impotent, or an amorphous, rudderless Pan-African nationalism which has been impotent in the face of the struggles that we have been facing. We need to be grounded in our ancestral culture, our clans, our identity, and develop a real nationism, which is the purification of nationalism. So we're going to be dealing with Amansesu nation building. We have a number of different presenters. Of course, the conference is free. It's from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. We will have vendors throughout the course of the day. We'll be giving away a free copy of our book, Odwiraman Afashe, to everyone who attends the conference. Of course, it's open to Afurakani people only. So you'll see all of that information. We'll post a link in the chat room, the Odwiraman Afashe page. This is one of our 3 annual conferences. We have the Hoodoo Nation Festival in mid-October. We have the Etchi Sign, Afurakani Afurakaitni, African Ancestral Religious Reversion around the spring equinox, which was March 21st this year. And then around the summer solstice, we have Odwiraman Afashe, dealing with the nation building, nation restoration. So you can get the detailed information from the Odwiraman Afashe link that we just posted. It's on the website. We had the deadline for ad submissions for ads. If you would like to place your ad in the journal, your business, your organization, your institution, your study group, or if you just like to support the work we are doing and place an ad to send a message of, wisdom to the community, everyone will receive a free copy of the book. Plus the book, the ebook version will be placed online. We have received millions of hits on our website on a yearly basis. So when you place an ad, people will see that, hundreds of thousands of our people will see the ad and so forth. So the deadline was last night, so some people didn't hear the broadcast last night, so we can extend that to today. So if you still would like to place an ad, you can go to the website, the Odwiraman Afashe page, but we do need to get those JPEG files in as soon as possible because we need to begin to format the journal so we can have it ready for publication prior to the conference. So you can go to the page and check that out. 1 quarter page ad is $25, a half page ad is $35, a full page ad is $50, and of course it's a full color. And the journal is an 8.5 by 11 size, magazine size, full size, so the ads are large. So all of that information is there. We do have a few spaces left as well for vending. We provide a 6-foot table and 2 chairs. The vending space is $30 for the entire day. So all of that information, including the vendor registration application, is there on the page as well. All that information you find on the page. So the topic for tonight, Ur Benu, or Urban, Hoodoo, and Atem Khepra, called ODOMANKOMA-ATMU and Akhan. We're going to get into that. We also have an extended question and answer session for any questions you have, whether it's on this topic or any other topic that we typically address or we have addressed in the past, and you may have had questions about that. So we published a short document, and then we're going to read from our book, ODOMANKOMA-ATMU TWEREDUAMPON-KHERER, which is Atem Khepra. In that book, we show that ODOMANKOMA-ATMU Atem Khepra in ancient Kemet That's the title of Atem, but then we also have the term TWEREDUAMPON-KHERER, which is the title of Cherera, which is the title of Khepra in Kemet and Kanat as well. So in the book, we're showing that the same deities that we worshiped in ancient Kanat and Kemet are still worshipped by the same name in our Akhan tradition today, the same functions, operating through the same aspects of nature. We never stop worshiping these divinities. We never stop being possessed by these divinities. We never stop communicating with them. We never stop engaging them through Adebisa, the divinatory process on the continent, in the western part of the continent, as well as into the western hemisphere in the Hoodoo tradition, as well as the Obia tradition and Winti tradition and so forth. So, and we'll put a link, as a matter of fact, to the publications page so you can download the free ebook version of this book so you can read along with the information as we go through it. The NHOMA page on the website is the page where our publications, you can find all of our books. We have published 20 books to date. All of the ebook versions of our 20 books are on our website. We have made them available as free downloads. So if you don't have any funds, you can still download the entire book, the ebook version, the full version for free. We also publish the soft cover versions of our books. We publish in-house on our own printers in color. We do not contract that out. The soft cover versions range between $8 and $11. And we should also mention we've sent out an email today via our network as well as on Facebook as well. We're having a special fundraising special. We have our normal special of the first 5 books for $40, which is a 20% discount. Those 5 books are Afuraka, the origin of the term Africa, where we prove that conclusively and showed in the Medutu, Hieroglyphs, Maraneti, divine law, love, and divine hate, which are the 2 poles of divine order. Law and hate, they're deities of law, male and female forces of divine law, which is love. They're also male and female divine forces of divine hate. Hate is the contractive pole of divine order. Law, which is the same word as love in our culture, is the expansive pole of order. So law or love is expansive. Hate is contractive. These are the expansive and contractive poles of divine order. So Maraneti, divine law, love, and divine hate is the second book. We have Ur Benu, the ancestral summons dealing with ritual practices. We have Kukutuntun, the ancestral jurisdiction, where we talk about the cosmological foundation of creation, as well as the origin of the fictional cartoon characters who never existed, including Jesus, Yeshua ben Pandera, Muhammad, Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Allah, Yahweh, Buddha, Brahman, Solomon, Sheba, Menelik, Moses, Aaron. All of these characters are fictional cartoon characters who never existed of any race or in any form whatsoever. And we prove that conclusively. And our book is the first to prove those proper etymologies and the cosmology that support those etymologies. We also have the book, the Okra Complex, the soul of Akan, talking about the nature of the Okra, called the Ka, and the Ka is the soul, the divine consciousness. Ka is not the spirit. The Ka is the soul. It is a deity that dwells in the head region. Ka for males, Ka'et or Ka for females. So we go into detail about that and show how it's still called the same thing in the Akan tradition, has the same function. So those are the 5 books, the first 5 books, which are foundational, 5 books for $40. But the special that we're having, which is part of our fundraising for the conference, is you can order 5 books for $40. That's 20% off, of course. But you don't have to just get those 5. Whatever combination of 5 books you would like, you can order that. You just, when you click the special PayPal button that says 5 books for $40, just add in the comment section which 5 books you would like to receive. So any combination is fine. We're having this because the conference is free. All our presentations are free wherever we are, go in the country. All of our presentations are free. We do not charge a speaker's fee to organizers of our event. We also do not charge an admissions fee for people to come in and hear us present. We also give away a free copy of one of our softcover books to everyone who comes to an event, notwithstanding if they have any funds or not. So we've given away over 860 of our softcover books to various people all across the country. We want to keep that going. We're going to keep that going, of course, for the conference on June 24th. We also want to cover assisting covering travel expenses for a couple of our presenters who are coming in from out of town to present, as well as operating expenses for the conference. So if you would like to order 5 of our books for $40 at 20% discount, we have that special going on. You can do that at the publications page. So one of those books is the ODOMANKOMA-ATMU and TWEREDUAMPON-KHERER, which is Atem Khepra. That's the book we'll be reading from tonight. It's one of the books that you can purchase and check out from the site. So we're going to pull that up. But first, we're going to talk about this notion of urbanization from a rounded perspective. So when we talk about urbanization, and we call it Ur Benu or urban hoodoo, and its relationship to ODOMANKOMA or Atem Khepra, what are we talking about? Often when people talk about urbanization in the city, the inner city, and so forth, we're going to show etymologically what these terms can actually and what they really mean when we're talking about urbanization. So first and foremost, the term in ancient Kemet, this is from one of our articles that we're going to post later, and it's directly related to the book as well. The term Ur, spelled U-R or W-R, in the Medutu, in the language of ancient Kemet, Ur means great, much, superior, very, greatness, great size, large. As when referencing an individual, can be a great man, a great deity, prince, chief, noble, and so forth. Or the great one. In Akhan, in the Akan language, that same word from ancient Kemet, Ur, becomes, in ancient Kemet is Ur, but it can also be in Coptic, Owur, O-W-R, Owur. In Akan, we still have the same vocalization. So when you look in the Akan language, the Cree language, the term is Odwira, which means a great one. It's an honorific title. So you have Odwira in Akan, you have Owur in Coptic, the late Kemet dialect. You also have Wur in the earlier dialect. And then Urat is the female. And then in Akan, you have Awura, which is the female. Owura is the male. Awura is the female. That's in the Asante and Akwamu dialect. In Fanti, you have Ewuraba, which is a variation of Awura, which is the female, the great female, and honorific title for the female. So the same thing in ancient Kemet. You have Urat, you have Owura in Akan, Awura in Akan for the male and female honorific titles. Great, great one. It can also be associated with the great god, great goddess, greatness, and so forth. Chief, chieftainess, great woman, great male, all of those kinds of things. Then you have the term Benu, the sacred Benu bird, the soul or Ba, or actually the spirit, the proper derivation, the spirit, the Ba of Ra. Sometimes you hear them say the soul of Ra. If you want to be technical, it's actually the spirit. The Ba is the spirit, the Ba is the spirit, the divine living energy. The Ka and the Kayat is the soul, the consciousness. So the Ba of Ra is the Benu bird, the sacred Benu bird that sits on the Ben stone. When you look at the sacred Ben stone in ancient Kemet, and you see the Benu bird flying across the primordial waters and then lands upon the Ben stone, it's the pyramidion, as they say, the capstone of the pyramid, but it also represents and references the primordial mound that rises up at the beginning of creation to break through the surface of the primordial water. Prior to the first landmass emerging from the primordial waters, the entire planet is covered by water. The male and female ocean move and move. And then because of the volcanic eruptions on the ocean floor that are caused by the spirit of Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress, whose energy penetrates the primordial earth, enlivens the primordial earth, causes earthquakes on the ocean floor, and causes vibrations and so forth, causes volcanic eruptions, and a portion of the ocean floor rises up and is forced up to break through the surface of the water. That becomes the first landmass of earth. That is Afuraka, Afuraikai, the Ka the raised land, the Apura, the Creator, the Ka'et, the raised land of Apuraet, the Creatress. And of course, in our book, Apuraka, Apuraika, the origin of the term Africa, we've proved that conclusively. A portion of that landmass rises up, and the peak of that landmass rises up. Then you see the sacred Benu bird flying across the primordial waters and then alighting upon that raised land. So, Benu is the second portion. Ur is the great one. Benu is the sacred bird associated with the divinity Atem. The Benu bird is the Ba of Ra, the spirit of Ra. It rises. Ur Benu is the word. Ur Benu also means to rise. It rises with the sun and sets upon the primordial mound at the beginning of creation to concretize or finish creation. Now, the deity Ptah fashions the world. He's at the innermost core of earth, the fiery energy at the core of earth. On the masculine side is Ptah, the thermodynamics of the molten core expanding and contracting. That's the male force Ptah, along with Sechima, Sekhmet. They're working together at the inner core of earth, fashioning, expanding, and contracting, and so forth in the inner core. And that molten earth will push forward and push upwards, and the portion of that becomes that first landmass. Those volcanic eruptions are a result of the working of Ptah and Sechima, Sekhmet when they are enlivened by Ra, and Ra is the creator and creatress. The mind, living energy moving throughout all of the created universe. So, Ptah and Sekhmet at the core of earth, they are fashioning at the core, and then that volcanic eruption happens, and it explodes to the surface of the water. And that first landmass rises up, and it begins to cool down. The spirit of Atem, the Benu bird, operating through that sacred animal totem. We'll talk about why they use that bird as that animal totem. The energy moving through the primordial atmosphere, penetrating the primordial atmosphere, and resting upon and working upon that primordial landmass to begin to concretize that landmass. When the first landmass breaks through the surface of the water, it was underwater, so it's still soaking and so forth. It's still a soaked, earthly mass. But then when the energy of Atem moves through that mass, it begins to concretize and harden that landmass, and the water and the moisture begins to dry out. That landmass becomes dry, becomes hardened, and becomes a concretized entity. That's why we say Ptah fashions the world. Atem concretizes or finishes what Ptah has fashioned. The Benu Atem. One of the definitions of Tem in the language of Kemet, Atem is hard, compact substance. He is the force that concretizes the primordial mound like clay pot being concretized or hardened in a kiln or an oven. So when you have a potter on a potter's wheel, they have the clay, it's spinning around on the wheel, you add water to the clay so that you can fashion. You're like Ptah fashioning the primordial earth. It has to have water so it's pliable. You fashion it with the water into a specific form. Once it's fashioned into a specific form, now you put it into an oven or a kiln so the heat can draw that water and the form can now be concretized or hardened. Ptah is at the molten core, innermost core of earth, fashioning, expanding, contracting in that fire, along with Sechima, Sekhmet. Volcanic eruptions from the molten core causing a portion of the earth, primordial earth to break through the surface of the water, becoming the first landmass that breaks through the surface. It's still wet, it's still pliable, and so forth. The waters begin to recede, that landmass is exposed, that is Apuraka, Apuraika, the primordial landmass, the heartland of the world. But then the energy of Atem operating through the setting sun. And this is just like the sun sails across the sky. It's akin to the Benu bird flying across the sky and eventually setting. When the sun sets upon the western hemisphere, it is akin to a seed being planted in the ground. When you see the red setting sun You see the deity Atem shown sitting inside of the red setting sun. Sometimes the sun looks yellowish at its rising. You see Khepra, the great beetle, pushing that yellowish sun up above the horizon. When the sun is setting, sometimes it takes a reddish tint. You see the male force, the concretizing force, Atem sitting inside the red disk of the sun. So when that sun begins to sit or set, then it, quote-unquote, touches the earth. So that fiery energy touches the primordial earth, the first landmass that rose up, and that heat of the setting sun begins to concretize or dry out and harden the primordial earth. So Atem is sitting in the red sun. He's the first male divinity operating through the red sun to touch the primordial earth and sit upon that first landmass that just rose up. The first time the landmass rises up in the creation of the universe is the first landmass in existence, and then the sun sets upon that land, and the spirit of Atem, which is operating through the red sun, sits upon the land. That means the fiery energy penetrates that wet, soggy landmass and begins to concretize and harden that landmass. Atem, sitting in the red sun, is the first male divinity to sit upon earth. This is why they say Adam is the first man on earth. Atem, or dem, meaning red or ruddy, reddish in so-called Hebrew, comes from Atem. It's a corruption of the name of the deity Atem, sitting inside of the red sun, and of course is dealing with earth, the reddish earth, once it becomes fired up, dried out through that fire, and so forth. The whites and offspring, of course, are lying. There was no Adam. It doesn't represent the black man, that kind of nonsense, and doesn't represent 6,000 years ago the origin of the whites and offspring at all. It has to do with the deity Atem operating through the setting sun. So he concretizes the primordial landmass. When Atem comes, he fashions it, and operating sacred Benu bird, animal totem, just like the sun sailing across the sky. In ancient Kemet, you will see when the land was inundated, when it was flooded, every year around the same time, the inundation of the land, the entire land is flooded for a few months, but then the water begins to recede. And once the water begins to recede from the inundation of the Hapi, the river, the first thing that begins to rise up apparently is really because the water is receding. Then those primordial mounds begin to peak above the water. And you see a number of primordial mounds as the water begins to lower. And when those primordial mounds are first revealed, you see the Benu bird flying across the landscape, and then they land and set upon one of those primordial mounds. And when you look at the image for the show that we put out today, you will actually see the Benu bird setting upon one of those primordial mounds in the midst of the water. That's what we're looking at. That is akin to the sun sailing across the sky and setting upon the primordial mound. Atem operating through the setting sun, that fiery energy, that concretizing, consuming fiery energy that begins to concretize or harden or make concrete that which was fashioned and came up out of the primordial water. This is literally the Ur Benu, the great Ur Benu bird that comes to concretize that landmass. This is literally the Ur Benu, or urbanization, concretizing or concrete of the primordial mound of earth, bringing the heat, fire, light of the sun into the mound, earth, concrete city. It is also the concretizing of a way of life, culture, and philosophy. One of the pyramid texts says, O Atem Khepra, you become high on the height. You rose up as the Ben stone in the mansion of the Benu bird, and on spat out Shu, you spat out Tefnut, and set your arms about them as the arms of the Ka, so that your essence might be in them. Talking about Atem coming. So when Atem sets in the west, that energy is brought from Ra and Ra'ed, and he carries that energy into the landmass. He touches the sun, it's moving through the sky, but then it sets and touches the landmass, concretizes the landmass, hardens the landmass, makes it concrete, brings the energy of the sun into the landmass to fire it up and harden it, concretize it. We are in the extreme west. It's Afurakani people, the extreme west of Afuraka. We are in these urban jungles, these urbanized areas. When we understand who Atem is, Odomankoma is, that we can take advantage of the energy of Atem to begin to concretize our way of life. When we get back involved in our ancestral culture, store our ancestral values, then we concretize those or harden those within ourselves so we can establish a firm foundation. This is the foundation of Amansesu nation building restoration. So that's part of that article that we dealt with, and we want to go to our book, ODOMANKOMA-ATMU, TWEREDUAMPON-KHERER. We're going to get into some more detail about that. So if you look, you go to the NHOMA page, the publications page on the website, you'll see the link, and when you scroll through, you see the various different books and so forth. And ODOMANKOMA TWEREDUAMPON is one of those books. When we talk about the urbanization of Hoodoo, as well as Juju and Voodoo and so forth, bringing these ancestral religious traditions in our blood circles, we're in the Western Hemisphere. We break free from enslavement, wage war against the whites in our offspring. Now we're beginning to reestablish our cultures just like our ancestresses and ancestors, establishing that precedent of utilizing our ancestral religious tradition to give us the right insight and perspective so we can learn to wage war against our enemies effectively, massacre them, free ourselves from enslavement, force the end of enslavement in the Western Hemisphere. Those who engage that process, they're the ones who are successful at ending enslavement, as well as establishing independent towns, independent cities, villages, and so forth, nations in the Western Hemisphere. They set the precedent for freedom, independence, and the defense of our sovereignty. We are directly descendants of those individuals, those groups, and we need to establish that and build on that precedent as well. Building an independent nation in the Western Hemisphere as well as on the continent on our own territory. We don't only have that in the abstract, we are directly descendant of those people who have actually, what we are looking to do, free ourselves and be secure in our sovereignty, independent, self-governing, self-ruling. Our people have done that. So it's not an abstract idea or something to yearn for. We have already done it. It's not a philosophy about one day we're going to have a nation. One day in 100 or 200 years we're going to have our own nation. Our people already did that. So we need to build upon the people who are successful, not people who just had philosophies about one day we're going to have a nation, but they never actually affected it. Instead of following the people who never actually did it, we need to follow the people in our blood circle who actually affected it during the worst condition we were in, which was enslavement. If they could do that then, we can do that now. Not in theory, but because we're directly descendant from them. We have that capacity. So, this is what the urbanization, Ur Benu, the great concretizer of divine energy, concretizing culture, concretizing moral values, concretizing that spirit and that knowledge and character of nationism within our people. We give some more detail about Atem in our book. If you look on page 6 of the ODOMANKOMA book, what you see, we'll show an image of the red Aten, the red sun setting in the mountain range of the west, in the western horizon. So we show Akwamu is recognized to operate through the setting Aten, while the deity, the Atem Khepra, operates through the rising Aten. In the text of Ra and Aset, so-called, the story of Ra and Isis. Ra states in this particular text, I am Khepra in the morning, Ra at noon, and Atem in the evening. We show the actual images of them, showing Khepra on one side of Ra, Atem on the other side of Ra, and Ra standing in the middle. These are three different deities who work together, just like your heart and your two lungs are three separate entities, but they have an interdependent function. You would never say the heart and the lungs are the same entity. The same is true of these three different deities. Now, of course, the whites and their offspring are going to lie about our culture. So they try to fuse all the deities together and say we were practicing some monotheism or some nonsense like that. But then you have brainwashed Negroes who claim to be Afrocentric or African-centered or grounded and cultural and so forth, but they're still brainwashed. They still hold on to the pseudo-philosophies of the whites and their offspring. They fear reality because they still have a complex self-hatred, so they don't want to admit that our people are practicing ancestral polytheism, which is divine and reality. They want to embrace the stupidity of monotheism because their enemies, the whites and their offspring, told them that that's superior and polytheism is inferior. So you find silly Negroes running around trying to prove in their books and their presentations, oh no, we never had any gods and goddesses. That's not what our culture was talking about. We only believed in one God. That's pure stupidity. These are scared to death of Negroes who still worship and fear the whites and their offspring. So they don't want to tell the truth about their culture, our culture, because they're embarrassed about the culture because they still have a self-hating mindset. We have always been polytheistic. There are many gods and goddesses. And we communicate directly with them, the whites and their offspring, including white Asians, white Europeans, white pseudo-Native Americans, white Hindus, white Arabs, white Americans, and so forth. They are inferior physically and spiritually. They have no capacity to communicate with any deity, and they never will. They have no capacity to align with the great mother and great father, Amenet and Amen, and they never will. So they can't speak on any aspect of any ancestral tradition. We can, and we do, and we will continue. So these are three different deities that we deal with, that we invoke, that we communicate with, that they show up at our shrines and they show up during divination so we can see them, they possess, they communicate so we can hear them, feel them, experience them. That's not only on the continent, but also in the Hoodoo tradition, in the Juju tradition, the Vodou tradition, Grigri tradition, in North America, the Gullah traditions and so forth, still engage these exact same deities by the same names and descriptive titles. So, the Atem setting upon the mountains at sunset, as we said, is akin to a seed being planted into the ground. The solar power entering into the Asase earth to stimulate and fertilize it is reference to the spiritual force of Atem setting upon and penetrating the first risen landmass of Asase earth. Variations of the spelling of the name Atem is Tem, Atemu, Atemu, and we went into some of that, and we give some of the definitions there. Atem, Temu, meaning all, complete, whole, entirely, full. Temu. Tem, meaning to compress, squeeze together, to join. Tem, to make an end of, to finish. Temu, hard, compact substance. So many of the whites and offspring, of course, will lie about what this actually means. Black people have studied white Egyptologists and simply repeat that nonsense, or study white occultists and repeat their nonsense. They don't understand the various definitions of the name for Atem. But when you understand the cosmology and how the names are birthed through the cosmology because of the functioning of the divinities, when these forces move through creation and there's a concretization, the tough sound cuts off the life force energy that's moving forward. So when you are saying and then you cut it off with the T sound, you cut off the movement of the air. The life force energy within the air is cut off. It becomes concretized and formed into an entity within your mouth. When you have tough and tamu, when you say the life force energy is circulating within that structure that you make with your mouth when you say There's a volume that's filled up. The energy takes a specific volume. When you say it fills up within inside of you. The same thing when the life force energy is circulating within a sphere, it fills up, and that sound can be heard when you attune to the energy moving. It's a humming or sound. So tamu is the concretization of the energy as it's circulating within a womb structure and structure. That's the concretizing force. When you attune to the energy of the divinity as he is moving through creation, you can hear those sound vibrations emanating from that force in nature. We simply replicate them. That's why we can call him Atem Khepra, because that's the energy that is emanating that collection of sound vibrations as he functions in creation. The same is true for every male and female divinity as they function in creation. They give off or emanate a specific collection of sound vibrations that is unique to their energy complex. We hear those, we replicate them with our vocal cords, and we are enunciating their true name. So we don't just make up names for deities. Their names emanate from them, and we attune to them and repeat them. And the same is true for us as well. We talked about that with regards to the origin of names and the nature of names in Akan and Akan cultures. You have a specific form, a specific collection of sound vibrations emanating from you, a specific unique collection of sound vibrations. When you repeat those, that is the actual name that is emanating from you on a consistent basis. So, Atem Khepra, all complete, whole, entirely full, compressed, squeezed together to join, to make it end up, to finish, hard, compact substance. All of those definitions of Atem Khepra, as well as Tem meaning red or ruddy and so forth, they're all tied together in the cosmology. Atem is in the red sun. The red sun is the consuming fire, whereas the rising sun, the yellowish sun of Khepra, is the explosive fire. The sun at noon is the radiant, effulgent fire. The setting sun is the burning, reddish, consuming fire that concretizes Khepra. You have Ra, you have Atem, the explosive, radiant, and consuming fires and so forth. They all have their own functions. And Atem is operating through the red sun, red Atem. He makes complete or full or finishes the day. That's the end of the day, to come to an end. Tem, to make an end of. Tem, to finish. Tem, then Temu meaning hard, compact substance, because when that sun sets and penetrates the earth, then it hardens or fires up or concretizes the wet, soggy earth and so forth, and makes it into a thing. And this is why Atem also means to compress, squeeze together, to join, to make an end of, to finish, hard, compact substance. Also red and ruddy. A Negro without an understanding but thinking they're a scholar and so forth would say, well, Temu meaning red and ruddy has nothing to do with all, complete, or full, and that has nothing to do with the compress and squeeze. That has nothing to do with finished or hard, compact substance or the sun. They couldn't see the various connections. But if you understand the cosmology, because you deal with the divinities, the connections are obvious and clear. So that's the urbanization piece, or the great Benu or Ben, which is the Ben stone, which is that pyramidion, which is reflective of the primordial mound or pyramidion or capstone, so to speak, or the peak of the highland that rises up out of the water. It becomes concretized when the red sun cooks it, so to speak, and hardens it. And this is what's taking place in the Western Hemisphere. We are Ur Benu, urbanized, the great Benu, the sun setting in the west. When we attune to that force of nature, we become concretized within our culture, hardened within our culture, grounded within our culture, and then we can concretize our moral values and begin to establish that independent nation. We engage the process of Amaniye nationism. The way we will practice Hoodoo and Juju and Voodoo and so forth would be slightly different than the way we were practicing if we were in a tropical environment where we had access to different plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth. We have to take advantage of the region of Asaseapoa, the Earth Mother, where we are. And we utilize what we have in this region of Asaseapoa, the Earth Mother, the plant life, animal life, mineral life in urban areas and ritual practices and the means by which we operate. So the movements, dance movements, songs, medicines, forms of divination will be unique to the experiences that we are having as we interface with this region of Asaseapoa, as we're carrying the energy of our ancestors from our blood circles, as well as the Obosom, the deities that govern us, into this region. So we have a unique expression in Ur Benu or urban hoodoo or juju or voodoo or grigri or wanga and so forth. So far, so if you have any questions or comments on the phone line, hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. If you have any questions or comments in the chat room. You must log in as a user in the chat room in order to interact. If you don't have a username, you can sign up for one quickly in Blog Talk so you can interact in the chat room in Blog Talk. You can give me 1 second and then we're going to get to that. Okay, so we're going to get to the phone line right quick. The first phone call. Okay, Michelle Wall on the phone line, number 8812. You had a question or a comment?
Peace, Brother Kwesi.
Yes.
I had a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I had a question as far as whites and their offspring. You say they have no capacity to communicate with any of our divinities. But I see a lot of whites and their offspring in a lot of spiritual groups on Facebook claiming to summon, our ancestral family. And
right.
also,
so you always, yeah. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Also, claiming to be mediums, claiming to have contact, with the great mothers and the great fathers and all of that.
Okay, so this is what's happening, and they always do that. Of course, every one of them is lying. Every one of them, whether it's a European, whether it's an Asian, whether it's a pseudo-Native American, a white Hispanic, white Latino, white Arab, white Hindu, whatever they are, when their relatives die, just like they communicate with their father in the hospital and their father dies or their grandmother dies or their brother dies or sister dies and so forth, and the spirit separates from the body, they still can communicate with their dead, criminal, white, perverted relatives. Those are quote-unquote spiritual communications. They have nothing to do with deity. They're communicating with disembodied, discarnate spirit. They can also communicate with people who are non-relatives. So you have some people who are receptive to their deceased relatives. Some people are receptive to non-relatives. No different than they would communicate with them when they were walking around alive. You walk down the street and you see a homeless person and you feel their negative energy because they're a little disordered and so forth. If that person dies, their little negative energy is still hanging around. They're just not in the physical body, so you can still feel that negative nervous energy. So some people can attune to that because they focus on that, and they're communicating with deceased relatives or non-relatives. Those are the only kind of spirit that the whites and their offspring can communicate with. Their dead relatives as well as some disordered non-relatives. They can't communicate, for example, with our spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors because our people repel them and they can never even get close. It's no different than two magnets on a table when the same polarities are facing. If you move one close to the other one, it repels. They will never be able to touch because they repel, and that will never change. That's an immutable reality. We are spirits of order, and we repel spirits of disorder by nature. All of the deities, the forces in nature are spirits of order, divine order. They are the embodiments of order in creation. They are children of the Supreme Being, Amenet and Amen, Nyamewa, Nyame, Mawu, and Lisa, and so forth. So the Supreme Being who establishes divine order creates the deities who are functionaries, the organs within the great divine body, embodiments of order. They all repel the whites and their offspring by nature. From the time one of the whites and their offspring was born into the world as a baby, their spirits are degenerate, disordered spirits from birth and even before they get into the womb. They are perverse, disordered spirit without an Akra before they get into the womb. And when they're born, even as a baby, they're still a perverse, disordered spirit. So they will never be able to communicate with any deity. They never have, and they never will be able to until we make them extinct, immutable reality. There is no exception to that reality. It never has been, and it never will be. So every one of the whites and their offspring who have ever said they communicated with any deity, any Voodoo, any Orisha, any Obosom, is an absolute deliberate liar. The spirits that they communicate are dead, criminal, child molesters, rapists, thieves, criminal white relatives, as well as some discarnate non-relatives. And if some of our people had fallen into criminality and rape and murder and so forth and became disordered and deceased, they can communicate with some of those criminal disordered entities because they're on the same lower vibration as well. Those are the only spirits they have ever been able to communicate with and ever will be able to communicate with, the cancerous cells in the body of black humanity. Just like we have the capacity to communicate with our ancestors, including those who are spiritually cultivated, as well as the forces in nature, the whites and their offspring have no capacity. We can repel them, we can crush them. Just like your body immune system crushes cancerous cells all day long to keep you healthy. The only way it doesn't do that is if you compromise your own immunity, and then the slightest little virus can take you down if you compromise your immunity. If you keep your immunity strong, then you're killing viruses and bacteria all day long without effort. So the whites and their offspring are just viral agents that when we live in harmony with a basic level of order, we repel easily and we destroy easily. When we reject our culture, reject our traditions, begin to operate and try to embrace cancerous cells, it's like trying to drink a whole bottle of salt and so forth, and forcing the little whites inside of our system, and then we start having problems with our blood vessels and everything because we're trying to force the weak little whites individuals in our system. So that's all that's happening whenever they talk that nonsense.
And another thing, thank you, brother. And another thing, okay, so I just started a new job, and it's my manager. She is a white woman, but somehow she just wants, I guess she wants to find anything wrong in me. And she has been basically attacking me, and I feel like she's been spiritually trying to attack me. Would it be wrong for me to petition her death, or, just to kind of take her out? Or, is it wrong for me to do that, or am I going too far? A friend of mine said I will be going too far.
It's never going too far. These are spirits of disorder. So that's like saying, that's like your immune system cells that normally kill cancerous cells because that's what they're designed to do. And you invoke the Obosom that govern our divine immunity, and imagine some other cell in the body saying, wait a minute, immune system cells, why are you trying to kill somebody? You shouldn't be trying to kill these cancerous cells. You're going too far. That's what they're designed to do. That's their function. We're not designed to live in harmony with cancerous cells. Cancerous cells don't have a divine function. They degenerated from a divine function and proliferate as a degeneration. So they don't have a divine role in creation. They're not to be preserved, protected, lifted up, transformed. They're only to be exterminated and moved out of the way. So there's no such thing as going too far with regard to eradicating cancer cells. You can always associate it with the body. Your body doesn't go too far when it destroys and exterminates cancer cells. It's actually doing its job.
Thank you. And one more last thing. So I was wondering, I know like after dating someone or something like that, I always does like cleansing to kind of, just get that energy up off of me of past relationship and the person that I was, dealing with and talking to. But during a friendship or relationship, is it wrong to cleanse, their energy up off of you, even though you guys are currently in a relationship?
Now, when you say cleanse their energy off of you and you're currently in a relationship, what would be the reason why you felt you needed to cleanse their energy off of you if you're in a relationship? I mean, is there there's a negative thing going on? Is that what you're saying?
if you're thinking about him too much, if you're just basically acting out of character, like being a little too clingy. I mean, things like that. Like, how do you balance that to where it don't become perverted or out of disorder? I'm just trying to keep the balance, and I don't want to be too clingy, but I feel myself being too attached, and we're not married, so I'm wondering, like, do I need a cleansing, or, what could I do to help me?
Okay, so in this particular instance, you're not talking about a situation where the other person is doing something negative. You're just talking about individually, you don't want to be overly clingy or drawn into the person's orbit too much. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because his spirit is strong, and I desire to learn from him and be around him. So it's like I believe I'm just being a little too clingy, and I'm wondering, like, should I just cleanse myself, and would that help, or could this be the one? Because we're just dating.
Okay, so now the answer is actually within what you just said. So you said that his spirit is strong and you want to learn from him and things like that, but then you don't want to be too clingy and so forth. Should you cleanse? Somebody can have a strong spirit, but you have a strong spirit as well. You have just like the sun has enough weight or substance to have an orbit, or, to pull other planets into the orbit. It doesn't have to chase the planets. Energy is so powerful and strong, it draws the planetary bodies into its field, operate according to your functioning creation. Then you generate that kind of field as well, that magnetosphere as well. So it won't be a situation where you feel like he has a strong spirit and you're drawn into his orbit. You have a strong spirit just as well, and people want to be drawn into your orbit. So the key is to find out what your function is. When we talk about ancestral religion, the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance, and we seek to align every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day. When you deal with your ka'et, your soul, your divine consciousness, that's the divinity in your head region, the spiritual force that pulls you in the right direction on a consistent basis. And we seek to align ourselves with that pull. You need to engage your ka'et, we call it the okra and Akan, or the Ordori and the Ordori Inu in the Yoruba tradition, Sebido and Dodon and the Chi and Ubo, but that divinity in the head region that was assigned to you before you even came into the world. You have a deity that's assigned to you before you came into the world, female divinity. You also have ancestresses and ancestors who are assigned to your blood circle as well. So you have your own divinity who you are to align with, to learn directly from. Somebody else that you meet can be complementary with regard to the things you learn from your own ka'et. And they can complement that and validate that and support that. But they're not giving you that information. The information is coming directly from your own soul, the deity that's been with you since you were in the womb. The information is coming directly from your ancestresses and ancestors. That's where you get your knowledge, information from. Somebody else can simply complement that and support that. And the same thing with the individual. He will get his information directly from his ka, from his insamafo and so forth. But then, of course, when he's on the right track, then you can complement and support what he's doing. But you get your direction directly from there. So you engage the process of cleansing your kra. And if you look in the book, the Okra Complex, the Soul of Akanko, which is one of the books we're talking about, one of our books. And then we have a video on that as well, talking about aligning with the Kra and so forth, and establishing a shrine for the Kra, cleansing the head and so forth on a regular basis. That's what gets rid of that fuzziness and that disalignment, so you can be realigned with your own Kra, so you can make proper decisions.
Thank you so much. Midday.
Okay, no problem. Appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Okay, so there was a question in the chat room. So want to make sure we didn't miss that one. All right, hold on one second. Thought I saw something. There's one question about the Ur Benu and when is that going to be published. We're going to link that up to the website today or later tonight. It's a short document, but it's just a kind of a commentary on aspect of the book ODOMANKOMA that we were reading from. One of our books, ODOMANKOMA, focused on that concretization piece. The other question with regard to the rituals within the Akan Hoodoo, what are some good starting books to read to get a basic understanding and idea for expanding our practice? So there, as far as ritual practice with regard to Hoodoo, not really books that we could recommend because they're often mixing, Christianity or trying to mix the Bible, the Psalms, and all that kind of nonsense. So you have to read between the lines. So, part of this process of us publishing on Hoodoo, publishing a couple of books on Hoodoo so far and a number of different broadcasts, is to begin to correct that and purify this tradition. So we have our book, Hoodoo People. We have the Hoodoo Mind book. We also have the book Etchi Sign, which includes information about Hoodoo, and the number of broadcasts that we have done. You can look in our Okra Complex book as well, and the broadcasts we did and the related articles on NHOMA, Ancestral Shrine Communication and Liberation. But those are the key right there, Ancestral Shrine Communication and Liberation. That particular broadcast and the articles associated with that dealing with establishing an ancestral shrine. Because once you begin that process, then your NHOMA, your ancestors and ancestors of your direct blood circle begin to take over to direct you as to which additional things you should add to your shrine. If you're out in nature or even out at a marketplace and so forth, traditional things are being sold and you grab certain things, they will let you know if that's something you need or something you don't need. If you're out in nature and they direct you toward certain stones or a shell or some natural element and so forth, they will direct you as to if you need to bring this to your shrine, if you don't, and so forth. They begin to sanction what you bring and what you don't, what kind of activity you engage in and what you don't. So you start off the ancestral shrine, moving forward from there. But we're going to be publishing some more information on that. But the NHOMA Ancestral Shrine Communication and Liberation broadcast, which is on our YouTube page and the Blog Talk page, we're examining those 4 different articles, including the one dealing with the Ancestral Shrine Communication and Liberation, or establishing an ancestral shrine. So you can check those out. Okay, so back to the phone line. Michelle on the phone line, number 4836. You got a question or a comment?
Yeah, how you doing? Yeah, so I had a question about Bebra. Basically, I thought when white folks passed away, that was the end of them, body, mind, and soul. But now I hear that they go into the spiritual realm and they reincarnate. I'm just wondering, why they get that privilege? Why is that so, basically?
Well, now, it's not a privilege. It would be a privilege if, for example, and the idea that they only have one life, that's propagated by them, whether it's through Christianity or Islam and things like that. They propagated that idea. They didn't want us, through trying to destroy our knowledge of our ancestral religious practices and understanding of the reality of the world and existence, they did not want us to focus on the fact that they could return. Because if we focused on the fact that they could return, then we would have a totally different mindset. If you think that once they die it's over, then you're like, okay, well, maybe we'll just let them do what they do and then we'll just try to move on. But if you know these crackers are coming back, the same ones who enslaved will come back through their descendant, their specific blood circle, 100, 150 years later, they come back, then you will seek to eradicate them, and then they won't have a channel to come back through. They're coming back through their own descendants.
Can that be done physically and spiritually as far as eradicating them? Can we kill them in the spirit and in this realm as well?
Yeah. Now, this is the key. So, for example, if you had a number of people in a city for example, say you had 1,000 Odwirafo spirits of disorder, whites in our spring in a city, and all of the females were killed and all of the males were killed, and their spirits are just hanging around. They don't have any descendants to reincarnate through. Now, unless one of those people, one of our people were ignorant and they copulated with the whites and the mulatto vessel for one of these corrupt spirits to come back through, because one of them could come back through an interracial coupling, or one of our people could come back through and be forced to operate through an interracial body. So it depends on what spirit is returning. But say, for example, on the physical side, in a certain area or even in a country, the entire population was wiped out. They didn't have a lineage to reincarnate through. They would have to go back to a previous lineage, going back to Europe somewhere, and try to reincarnate through some of those people. But if they were all wiped out and they're just spirits hanging around, what first needs to happen is us breaking those karmic relationships with them. And those karmic relationships are, they engage in negative practices with us, and we just turn the other cheek and all that other nonsense. We need to even the score. We need to wage war against our enemies, eradicate our enemies, and so forth. And then, because after that point, yes, even the disintegration of the spirit can take place. But first, those karmic relationships need to be resolved, meaning we need to even the score, settle the score, and so forth, project the same kind of fire against those spirits that they projected against us, and put that same kind of pressure and torture and energy towards those disordered entities, but then those spirits can be disintegrated as well.
Okay, so that would basically be the end game, the disintegration of their spirits.
Right. So now the key is, and when you said initially we want to make a distinction, it would be a privilege if they were able to reincarnate and receive a Ka, which is a deity that governs their head, and assigned to specific Obosom and have access to forces of nature and so forth. Then that would be a privilege, and that wouldn't make sense. They don't have that. So when they return, when their spirit separates from the body, for example, when our spirit separates from the body at death, then we dwell with our ancestresses and ancestors for a period. Before we reincarnate, we are drawn to Nyamewa, Aminet, Amen. We are assigned a Ka, a soul, a divinity, a deity that dwells with us, that takes up residence in the head region. We are assigned matriclan and patriclan divinities that give us a specific configuration of energy. And now we are spirit that have a soul. We are spirit with a soul, assigned to specific divine forces in nature, and we carry that energy into the world. When the whites and their offspring die, their spirit separates from the body. There's a funeral. Usually the body is buried. Their spirit hangs around the earth or hangs around, their family members for a while, hangs around the lower level of the spirit realm, where other negative criminal entities are, no different than if somebody gets kicked out their house and now they're homeless and transient, and the only place they can hang around are the people who are doing the same things, because nobody else in the population deals with them. They try to come over your house, you slam the door. They try to come into a store, they get kicked out. So the only places they can hang out is in the street, in the gutter, where other people are doing the same things, doing drugs and so forth, and they have that existence for 30, 40, 50 years. When the spirit of the whites and offspring dies, the only spirits they can hang around are the same negative, perverse entities, and they're hanging around like homeless, transient, perverted spirits. And then at some point, one of their descendants, a few generations down, begins to copulate, and that perverse energy draws them back into the womb. They don't go up to Inyame, they don't receive a Ka, any deities assigned to them. They go from the physical world to a lower level of the spirit realm, or other homeless, transient criminal spirits are, and then they get sucked right back into a white womb and right back on earth. So they're walking around like a body without a head, a spirit without a crop.
Yeah.
So they're disordered, cancerous entities. So just like cancer cells in the body, they're operating within the body, and they're slated for destruction because they're going to be killed by the immune system. These are little cancerous cells moving within the body of black humanity. The only reason we have not executed them is because we've been conditioned to believe that we shouldn't do that. So once we realign with our culture, of course, we understand divine hate is one half of divine order, and we move in a proper fashion. So they've been skating along as cancerous cells, and just like if your immune system becomes compromised and the cancer cells begin to proliferate, and now they have an existence that normally they didn't have. They used to get killed right away. Now they can develop into a tumor, and they can start to spread and metastasize and get into other parts of the body until their development is arrested. But just being a cancerous cell, developing as a cancerous cell within the body, that's not a privilege. That's actually a demotion, because they're slated for destruction from birth. And that's really how it should be with the whites and their offspring.
Definitely. That's a wonderful answer. I appreciate it. This is Quadjo, by the way. I have the group on Facebook, 1865. I'm always putting your stuff on there, shouting you out. Mira say, brother. Right on, man. I appreciate you, man. Heads up.
Heads up. Okay, so I just want to check the chat room right quick. Make sure we didn't miss anything else in the chat room. And also, for those who came in a little bit later, we also mentioned that when we talked about last night, when we were talking about the Odwiraman conference, those who wanted to place ads in the book, last night was the deadline, but some people missed the broadcast last night, so you still have a chance to place, send us your JPEG files if you want to place an ad for your business, organization, or institution in our upcoming publication, the Odwiraman book that is going to be for the conference on June 24th. Of course, if you'd like to come to the conference, you can register. It's free registration. You can check that out on the Odwiraman page. All-day conference will have vendors, presentations on Amaniye nationism, Afurakani nationism, purification of nationalism. And for those who came in a little bit later, we also have our special going. When you go to the publications page, we always have the 5 books for $40. That's one of our discounts. It's 20% off. 5 books is $40, but the special is as part of this fundraising effort for the conference, because, of course, the conferences are free. You don't have to just get the first 5 books. You can choose whatever 5 books you want. So you click the same button that says 5 books for $40. But in the comments section, when you're checking out in PayPal, just type in the specific 5 books that you would like to receive. Any combination is fine. Any one of the 20 books or any combination of the 20 books, or if you want all 5 of the same book or something like that, whatever combination you want, you can do that. That's part of that special. And we're using that to raise funds to assist with the operating expenses, as well as to assist with travel expenses for a couple of the presenters who want to come from out of state to present at the conference. So that special is going on now, so you can go to the publications page and order the first 5 books for $40. And, of course, we also have our deals, which are permanent. Any order of 10 books or more is automatically 30% off. So, for example, the first 10 books is $66 for the first 10 books. The whole 20-book set is $125. So we have that. All right. So we're going to get back to the phone line. Oh, there was one question. When will last evening's class be available? So we're going to post that up. It'll be available by tomorrow morning. We normally do it the next day as far as on YouTube. Now, the broadcasts are automatically available within about a half an hour after the end of the broadcast on the Blog Talk Radio channel. So once we complete a broadcast, if you wait for about a half an hour or 40 minutes, and then you go back to the Blog Talk Radio channel, then you will see that broadcast is available to download and listen to. The archive is there. What we do in addition to that is we save that broadcast, download it as an MP4, create a YouTube video, and then upload that to YouTube. That takes a number of hours because Blog Talk does not allow you to simply upload a broadcast directly from Blog Talk directly to YouTube. They don't allow you to do that, so you have to go through a process, which takes a number of hours. So normally we do that. So we have the same broadcast on the Blog Talk channel that you can access at any time, but then some people prefer to watch it on YouTube as well, so we just create the YouTube video. We normally do that the next day. We didn't get a chance to do it today, but you can listen to that broadcast on the Blog Talk channel now today, but we're going to upload it by tomorrow in the form of a YouTube video as well, so you have two different places you can view it, on YouTube as well as on the Blog Talk channel. All right. Okay, Michelle on the phone line, number 0504. You had a question or comment?
Peace, family. I wanted to ask, I was directed in spirit to put sand and fossils on my shrine. But at the same time that I got that in spirit, I was getting a pull to represent something that would have the energy of the four elements, like earth, wind, fire, and then the four directions, like north, south, east, and west. And I didn't realize or recognize that you had said anything about that yesterday, and I'm trying to find out if I had misinformation in my spirit on that, or where is that coming from?
No, that's not misinformation. Now, sometimes what happens is, for example, say somebody, maybe you might have read a book on the Yoruba tradition, or maybe Vodun or something like that, and they may have a specific way that they establish a shrine. So they may use some efun and mark out a space in the corner of the house, and then they, set up a place where they pour libation and have a candle or different things like that, and so forth. And then that seems, it seems kind of common, and wherever you look, they kind of say the same things because they're coming from the same tradition. And whether you talk to people or you read about it or you see it online and things like that. But then your Nsamafo come along and say, hey, no, you need to put dirt on your shrine. Not just a white cloth, but you need to have soil and, in fact, a mound of dirt, and that's the base of your shrine as opposed to a white cloth. Or they tell you to use sand, and you haven't heard of that before, but when you step back and listen to what your Nsamafo are saying, when you step back and engage that, and then you begin to look around, and they will direct you to the spaces to look around, you will find that different groups actually do the same thing. Some will use sand, and some will use soil, and some will use a white cloth, and some will use different things. So different groups have their own expression. That's true on the continent. Various different groups have their own ways of establishing ancestral shrines. But then it's also true in the Western Hemisphere, because we're going to continue to do things the way we've done them, but then we're also going to have different innovations based on our interfacing with Asase Afua, the fertile Earth Mother, and Asase Ya, the barren Earth Mother, but also dealing with burial and justice and so forth. The way we interface with them in this region of Earth, then we have our own innovations about the way they want us to do things over here. So it will be slightly different than the way we did things on the continent in many regards. And that's the way we establish tradition. We listen to the Nsamafo and the Obosom just like we did on the continent. They listen to the Obosom and Nsamafo, and that's where they develop their practices from, and that's what we inherit. When we continue to listen to them, they direct us to use something different like seashells for divination, or certain stones for divination, or whatever it is, or sand divination with markings in the sand and so forth. Whatever they direct us towards is a reason for that. Yeah, so it's not a thing where you just, making things up. Now, you can always confirm with them. It's not a rush. If they give you some information you're not sure, you can always ask again until you get fully grounded and you're confirmed and sure and secure in what you're hearing and seeing, then you go ahead and move forward. And yes, sometimes dealing with the different elements, like even for very often traditional shrines, you see people with Yoruba or Akan or different things. Some people have candles, bowls of water, soil or planets, things like that. That's the fire, that's water, that's earth, air, dealing with the incense and so forth. So those different things are very often part of a traditional shrine, depending on the group.
Okay, all right. I've been kind of experimenting with the shrine. I've been going back and trying to find ancestors, but I guess with me and my family, the problem that I've been having is that a lot of the older people have passed away. So I'm not really, I guess, advanced in doing a shrine setting, but I've been trying to go back that route to realign myself. And these are one of the things that I've received since I've been doing that. So, you know, that's basically where I've gotten so far.
Okay. Yeah, no, and that's you know, that's common with us here because very often we can only go back a few generations, whereas other people, you know, they're living on the continent, they go back 10 generations of their family or 12 or something like that, and they know everybody's names and know who's who were criminals and who were real people, and they know who not to deal with and who to deal with and who to evoke and who not to evoke and stuff. And for us here, very often, as far as our lived experience, we may have met our great-grandmother, great-grandfather, or maybe some people the great-great every now and then, but most of us have not. Or you may have a grandmother, great-grandmother who can tell you, oh, this is what my great-grandmother's name was and stuff like that. So you go back a few generations, but you may not necessarily know, okay, was this an honorable individual or not? So what you're doing is correct. You go back. Number one, you evoke the class of ancestors and ancestors, the Akhutu, who are the spiritually cultivated ones, no matter what their names are, just that class, the Akhutu, as they're called in ancient Kemet and Kanat, the NHOMA, they're the only ones who can respond to that kind of evocation, where you know you're dealing with the right one. And when you evoke them as a class, even if you don't know their name, then they will begin to direct you towards even tangible information or resources to be able to gain some more information about your direct family and who's who and who's deal with it, who not to deal with. But so you're on the right track with that.
Okay. Now, as far as the 4 directions and the 4 elements, is that something that I can also, is that an element that I can also bring to Voodoo, or should I just keep that for the shrine or let the spirit direct me on how to do that?
Now, when you said if you should, you're making the distinction between Voodoo and the shrine, so why are you making the distinction?
Okay, so in reading the pamphlets and stuff like that and trying to understand different things on the energy that you're bringing in, I'm wondering, can that same element be brought to Voodoo with the shells or the fossils and the sand, and I guess having something to represent the 4 elements and the energy, especially when you're trying to focus energy to eradicate disorder. Okay,
now, when you say bring it to Voodoo, what do you mean? Well, now this is the thing. In the Fon and Ewe language, of course, the names of the deities, they call them the Vodou, just like in Akan, it's the Obosom, and Yoruba, Orisha. But then in Fon and Ewe, they'll call the whole tradition, they'll call it Vodou.
Okay.
That includes, the tradition itself includes invoking the Vodou as well as evoking the Kuvita, which is the ancestresses and ancestors. That's the whole, all-inclusive within the tradition. So when you were talking about bringing the 4 elements to Vodou, did you mean, were you saying that you didn't know if that was a part of Vodou or not?
Right. I didn't know if it was something that I should have just kept at the shrine, or is that something that I could use as far as the energy that goes out with dealing with Voodoo?
You mean dealing with the deities themselves?
Yes.
Okay, so you're talking about the difference between your ancestral shrine and dealing with the Vodou, the forces of nature. I just want to make clear, because even though the ancestral shrine is part of the Vodou tradition, if you're following Ewe and you're utilizing that terminology, it's all inclusive, but there is a difference between, doing certain things with the ancestors and certain things with the divinities. But you'll find that in Vodun or in the Akan tradition or different ones, you'll see different expression. You'll see sometimes people, when they're pouring libation, they will drink a specific substance and they will spit it in the four directions. Or some people will do different things with liquids in the four directions at the ancestral shrine. So it depends on what you're doing and who you're invoking. So the key is starting with the ancestral shrine, starting with your ancestresses and ancestors, finding out exactly who you are and what your function is within your clan. And then that also leads to learning what specific Obosom or Vodou work with you and how to approach them. So you don't want to just, look at some different, I'm not saying you're doing this, but you don't want to just look at different rituals that people are talking about. You want to find out what specific Vodou, Obosom, Orisha came into the world with you and beginning to identify them. Now, they've shown you different signs and different things throughout the course of your life that you may not have been able to contextualize, whether it was animal totems or different things or dreams and them showing up in specific sacred colors and things like that. And the more you study and look in that direction, you'll realize that all along this specific deity has been showing up for years, and I didn't even realize that was happening. But you want to find out specifically who you are working with, who you were born into the world to work with before you engage that ritual practice. So starting off with the Nsamanfo, your ancestral shrine, and then that leads to giving you some details. They'll show you those different manifestations of the Vodou and how you're to operate with them.
Okay. All right, and then the last question I have also is, I guess not to make it too long, but what if you have, or what if there's a person that is disordered, but it is one of our people, and they keep inflicting pain through the children and trying to hold on through the children? I know yesterday you said something about eradicating disorder, but and then someone just said something here recently about I know they were talking about the Akwamu, and I guess they were saying something about they were going too far or something like that. If you have somebody that keeps on inflicting that pain on you, or they're doing something, they've done something to your children as far as abuse, they have allowed they're in a relationship with an Akwamu, and they have allowed that Akwamu to inflict pain on your children, drag you through the court system. What could you do at that point as far as stopping that, without doing anything illegal? I mean, what could you do on a spiritual level? Would you, I guess, would it be allowed or permissible to do, or I guess invoke? I know you can go to the ancestral shrine, but what more could be done if you feel like nothing is happening?
Well, what you want to do is find out from the Nsamanfo what is the best method and what track that this individual is on. Because as soon as they step outside of order, they already put themselves in a position where they can, it's just like somebody stepping off of a curve, and they put themselves in a position where if they stay on that track, they can get hit by a bus or whatever. So you ask the Nsamanfo what position they have already put themselves in and what you can do to accelerate or participate in whatever, justice needs to happen, or who to invoke to assist in that process and so forth. But when somebody goes against, when they engage in disorder and they're attacking and things like that, and it's one of our own people, it's no different than, if you're walking down the street and somebody, robs you. It don't matter if it's a cracker or if it's, one of the Odwirafo or one of our people. If they try to rob you or rape you, they are your enemy now. They're not, doesn't matter that they're melanin dominant, they're engaged in disorder. And some of our people have, repelled their own crops for their spirits of disorder as well. So that's very important to understand, because sometimes we'll have this idea that we, as long as people are black, we should all stick together, and that's not the case at all. It's never been like that. All of the whites in our spring are spirits of disorder, divinely hated but some spirits of disorder are also in our community that need to be rejected as well. You have cancer cells that come in from the outside into the body, and you have some cells that are in the body that become cancerous, and they still seek to consume us and destroy. So you want to find out from your Nsamanko what track or what lane these individuals already are on. What do you need to do to either accelerate this retribution, or do you need to step out of the way where you're putting yourself in the way to, kind of hinder that retribution from happening? Are you in the way, or do you need to participate? You want to find out where they're at and what you need to do to participate so you'll be most effective, where at the same time you won't be creating disorder within yourself. Attacking the enemy never creates disorder. You just want to be able to do so in a way that's productive and effective.
Okay. All right. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Okay. Midase, we appreciate the call.
Midase.
Okay. So we in here make sure we didn't miss anything. All right. Okay, get back on the phone line.
Odwirafo.
What's up?
Greetings. Call that call. Ask about Aakhuamuman. And well, let me say.
Could you speak up a little bit? I'm having a hard time hearing you a little bit.
Is my the phone breaking up?
That's a little bit better. It was a little bit low, but that sounds a little bit better.
All right. Getting better? You getting better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. In regards to because a lot of our people were raped by these same Aakhuamans, pretty much all of them, from the Hispanics to the European and the Mongolian, they call Asians, over the centuries, and particularly the last 4 to 5 years since the Ma'afa, both the Arabs and the European enslavement. Isn't it that now possibility now because some of them are in our own, some of our blood circle, because some have some traits like, either the skin, either by damage of the skin lightening, or, like how I would say, our skin's not heavily metallate, they're lighter brown to the hair or anything like that sort. Can they be so-called Aakhuamuman start soon come back in the blood circle? And our people will say, let's say they start to go intermingle outside their race. No one said that, that these spirits, we actually keep these people around. Now that most of these people are browning up, people are mixing in. But one time they came in by force into the blood circle. So even now, you say that most people that doesn't choose to continue that, isn't that a possibility some of these Aakhuamuman and spirit could come back in some form of belly bottle down a generation down the line because they already slipped into by force, either by the women or the men choose that sleep with their women? I'm not sure if it's clear if you want me to refer you to. Yeah.
No, that's good. Yes, and in fact, that's it's very important. So one of the broadcasts we did, Atem, the ramifications of reincarnation, and we also did Nesu, reincarnation and race, and Sune Anim, race and identity. So we did those 3 broadcasts, but the Atem, the ramifications of reincarnation, that's one of the broadcasts anybody can download on Blog Talk as well as on the YouTube channel. That's very key because we cannot allow our enemies, the whites and their offspring, to falsely define what makes a person's identity. We'll allow them to use the 1-drop rule in one direction, saying you have 1 drop of black blood that makes you black. And then, on the other side, like in Brazil, you have 1 drop of black blood and they're still calling them people white and so forth. So we're allowing the whites and their offspring to define identity, and they're lying, of course. We define identity because we know exactly who's who. So, for example, when you talk about interracial, miscegenation, that corrupt practice of interracial mixing or coupling, that scourge of interracialism. If a male, Afurakani male, or an Afurakani female couples with one of the whites in their offspring, then when they, draw a spirit into the womb, that spirit is either one of the whites in their offspring, one of their relatives returning, one of their great-grandparents returning, that white, quote-unquote, parent, or it's one of the black parents, great-grandparents returning. If it's one of their great-grandparents returning, the child will come out through that biracial womb, but it's one of those great ancestors and ancestors of the black person's, lineage that has returned, but is forced to operate in that light brown body. But they're still one of our people. They may be physically a mulatto, but the spirit that entered that womb, before it entered the womb, it may have been a Maasai warrior or an Asante warrior and so forth. Now because what one of their foolish great-great-great-grandchildren did by coupling with this cracker, now that great Asante warrior is being forced to operate through a light brown body with stringy, looking hair and so forth. But it's still the same Asante warrior or warrioress, or the same Maasai warrior or warrioress who has returned. They just look light brown. However, if it wasn't a spirit from one of the Afurakani parents or Afurakani parents' ancestry, then it was the cracker's white Irish or white, Anglo-Saxon relative that is drawn in. It's going to be born through a biracial union, so the body is going to be light brown with halfway straight hair and so forth. But that body of melanin will never make that spirit an Afurakani or Afurakani spirit. It's the same white cracker spirit, disordered spirit that does not have a Ka or Kayat that has come through. And no matter how much melanin they have, and if that spirit linked up with another mulatto just like him, who was also a white spirit that returned through a biracial union, and now you have two mulattoes, quote-unquote, biracially, but they have white spirits, and they unite, and they give birth to a medium brown child with fuller lips biracially, but it's one of the spirits of the white Irish people came back through, and then that child grows up and mates with a black person, and they draw one of their white perverted relatives through that union. The baby who is born will have full lips, a full nose, chocolate brown skin, and natural-looking hair, and that's the spirit of one of those white perverts that has returned because of this miscegenation. And the average person wouldn't be able to tell that this is one of the white spirits. What typically happens, and that happens all the time, and they are walking around within our ranks all over the place. Typically what happens is they manifest that in their behavior. So they're disordered in their behavior. People don't want to be around them. They're more attracted to being around the whites and their offspring. They're one of these Uncle Tom type Negroes, and they want to be around them. Or they're snake-like kind of individuals, and people don't want to be around them. And that's even our people who are brainwashed. They just know instinctively there's something wrong with this cat. I don't want to be around him. But when we get back involved in our ancestral culture, it's not just instinctive. We're going to our shrines on a regular basis. So anybody we come in contact with, when we go to the shrine in the evening, the Nsamanfo will let us know if we haven't picked up on it already. You don't need to be around this individual. This is the spirit of disorder operating through a brown body. So it don't matter what they say, even if they're very nice, you still don't have anything to do with them because you know they're a spirit of disorder. You repel them. You have no obligation to deal with them. So when you deal with your ancestral culture, we can identify them and cut ourselves off from them instantaneously and permanently. But that is an issue. But we can address that issue easily within the culture.
Okay. Thank you for clearing that up. And one thing, Odwirafo Kwesi, it's good to see you back on the Blog Talk channel because this information is always needed for the community to get awakened. Appreciate it.
Okay, we appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we are almost getting close to the end of the show, so we're going to take another call right quick. Get you on the phone line, number You had a question or a comment?
Yes, Chamo. I had a chance to see the recent History Channel remake of the Roots miniseries. So I personally considered it, I guess, a fine piece of propaganda that children shouldn't be allowed to watch without adult supervision to decode some of the propaganda that's been slipped in. There's also another show recently that's been on Underground. So I've been looking at it as far as, I guess seeing what aspects of the, what you refer to as the profanation of, including of Christianity or Islam into the aspects of the tradition that we were able to maintain on the plantations. Yeah, in the case of like the Roots storyline, we're looking at, you have Mandingo, you have depiction of Mandingo village, but you see like the introduction of Islam into some of their traditions and the way they do things. And then once, individual ends up on the plantation, then you have the Christian side of that coming in. If that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, so my question is, with respect to the ancestral shrine or the deity shrine, do those two need to be separate, or would you be able to contact both at the same shrine, or I guess different sections of the same area?
Okay, so typically your shrine or your space for your ancestresses and ancestors, very similar to you have a living room, and when people come over your house, they sit down and so forth. That is separate from the shrine for your Akra, the divinity that governs your head, or it's called the Odwirafo in the Yoruba tradition, or the Selido and Vodun and so forth. Those are separate because they have different functions. It's like the difference between your head region, which is the heavenly region, quote unquote, of the body, and then the earthly region, which is below the neck. They're interrelated, but they're in different areas. The brain wouldn't operate where the stomach is and so forth. So, those are typically separated. Some people are living in a situation, a housing situation where things are cramped, but you can have a portable, shrine. Sometimes people are living in a room. They may be renting a room in college and stuff like that. Set up a shrine, communicate with your Nsamanfo. Once you're done, you can fold up what you have, put it back in a container that you set aside for that until it's time to do so again. You can do the same thing with a portable shrine for your Akra, for the Odwirafo, if that's necessary. But yes, the shrines for the Nsamanfo or the ancestresses and ancestors are different from the shrine for whether it's the Kra, which is a deity in and of itself, or any other divinity.
Okay. Another thing, I've been sculpting out of wire, like usually copper wire. Later on using like sterling silver wire since I was about 8 years old. And an idea came to me, or I guess might have been sent, in regards to, if I'm looking to set up a new, a shrine for myself, that, I can sculpt figurines, for the shrine. So is there any particular process as far as my making the figurines, using them on the shrine, or as well as, invoking the deities or the ancestors to, I guess, operate through the figurines that I'm making as a point of the focus of their energy on the shrine?
Well, I would simply see, and that's something similar to what what the sister asked about before, when she was talking about the how she was directed to use the sand and fossils and things at the shrine. This is one of those things where you've been engaged in a process since you were a child. So whether it was something that you were shown how to do, but you were naturally inclined towards doing, ushered into or directed towards that kind of, utilizing those kind of substances. and all of the different metals, whether it's gold or copper or zinc or whatever it is, are connected to different Obosom and carry the energy of specific Obosom and so forth. So since you were already engaged in that process, I would say simply recommendation going to the Nsamanfo first so they can begin to show you and contextualize why you've been utilizing that and what, how it should develop even further with regard to ritual practice. Going to them first and finding out, and then they will give you that kind of direction, push you in a position or even put you in front of people who are doing the same thing. You end up coming in contact with somebody, and they actually have already been engaging in the process. They will put you on track to run into the right people, or they may just show you the information, whether it's through dreams or through at the shrine and so forth, on the best means about using the things that you've already been doing, already been directed to do, how it can unfold into a ritual practice that's rooted in your specific blood circle, working with these specific elements. So I will go to the Nsamanfo first to find that information.
Right. So I'm just thinking, as far as, I guess, the wire sculpting, that have been something that I may have been doing in a previous lifetime as far as creating sculpture and making other things. And then it carried over into this one.
Yes, because that's like, for example, goldsmiths or blacksmiths or, we've had those industries, and they're connected to different divinities. We've had those industries for thousands of years, so very often people are still carrying that energy, and they bring it into the next, incarnation, and they're just naturally drawn. You may have been working with those the same metal. You may have been working with copper, like coppersmith and so forth, back in the day, somewhere on the continent, utilizing it for healing purposes, and now you're naturally drawn back to that same practice. So that's the kind of thing you can get that kind of context from. And in fact, the fact that they would give you the idea, and you begin to, wonder about, well, maybe this is something more than just being an artist. Maybe this is something, more connected. They're putting you in that mind space to begin to consider and begin to reflect and do that sankofa and look back and see all the different linkages about how it came into being and what you've been doing and how it's associated with, ancestral culture. They'll start to put those things together so they can show you a track record of how they've been guiding and assisting you all along. And they're leaving their signature on events in your life all across, across the board, so you can identify them all along, and you feel comfortable and confident in the next step because you can see the track record going back for a number of years.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember when I was from, I think around age 8, and I started out just with making figurines from, wires for, used to tie bread. And then I eventually got a hold of some telephone wire, started making figurines. And then after a while, what happened is basically I would literally spend a few hours, perfecting the, figuring out how to make certain pieces and perfecting the pieces. And in some cases, I'd, mess something up, start back over until I got to the point where I could, any piece that I would master the pattern of making, I could hold a 3-dimensional image of it in my mind and also replicate that out of, whatever particular metal. And I got to the point where I would even measure, the length of wire that I would need, the thickness, how flexible the wire would need to be, things like that.
Okay. So, yeah, those are the kind of things. In fact, you can, look up, whatever culture you're drawn to, that you may be more drawn to than one towards the other. As well as in ancient Kemet, you can begin to look up things about copper and different smithery and metallurgy and stuff like that. And I'm sure they will direct you towards specific information that confirms things that you've been doing all along to give you that kind of insight and confidence to move forward in the direction that's unfolding already. So you can be firm in your conviction that you're on the right track.
Right. I guess my other question is, okay, in someone looking to determine, their most recent ancestors, within the last the last 2 to 4, maybe 5 generations back, and being that being that it's likely that we're liable to have a variety of different ancestors from various tribes or groups of people. Do you recommend that we, contact the oldest of our ancestors first and then have them guide them, and then request that they guide us to our more recent ancestors that we can make contact with or interact with?
Well, now this is, and that's a key point. And when you look at the broadcast we did on NHOMA, Ancestral Shrine Communication and Liberation, we go into some detail. The key is that even though you can have different, you may, especially for us over here, being, mixed up in dungeons and then on boats and on plantations and so forth, and shipped around and all that kind of thing, and moved around from plantation to plantation, you'll have different ethnic groups, Mindi and Akan, Yoruba, and a number of different ones in your recent ancestry over the past 100 years or 200 years or so forth. The key, however, is what group were you a part of the last time you lived on the continent. You have some of those ancestresses and ancestors who are assigned to you to assist you in your development. So even though you may have some other people who just are related blood-wise because people got married and stuff like that, before you entered into the womb, you already had specific ancestresses and ancestors assigned to you before you even got in the womb that come from the clan that you were part of before you even died in a previous lifetime. Those are the ones that have the primary responsibility for your development. So those are the ones when we talk about the Aku and Akutu, or the spiritually cultivated class of ancestral spirits, that's the key. So check out that NHOMA, Ancestral Shrine Communication broadcast. We'll go into some detail about that.
All right.
Okay, so we appreciate the call. We got a couple more calls to take, but we appreciate it. We appreciate the call.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I said that. Okay, so we have like 1 minute left in the broadcast. If you want to listen beyond 11:30, you must call in to get on the phone line, or else it's going to cut off if you're just listening via the net. 657-383-0635, 657-383-0635. You have about a half minute to call in. But we're not going to go much longer beyond the broadcast timing. So for those who are still on, remember we're still having that special 5 books. You can order 5 of our books for $40 as a 20% discount. That's part of our fundraising effort for the conference. Just go to the publications page. You can do that today, tonight. We're going to have that special. It'll be over soon, so check that out. If you want to place an ad in the journal, in the book, the Odwiraman Afashe book, then of course you can do that, see that on the Odwiraman Afashe page. You can also contact us on Facebook, and our various Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, as well as our regular email address if you have any questions about that. All right, so we have a couple more calls. We'll get to 1 or 2 of them, and then we'll be done. Hold on 1 second. Okay, Michelle on the phone line, number 5306. You got a question or a comment?
Yes, peace. Michelle Kwesi.
Yeah, Michelle, what's up?
All right, I just wanted to say I want to give you much respect and appreciation for you continuing on, sharing the information, or you being available to share the information, because you were sent, by ancestors and the ancestresses, to share the content with us, And when I started to develop my study group at first, I did it in a hobby phase. Well, I did it because of intuition, probably because of the inert, intuition that I have within me. But then I was a little bit hesitant about going forward, but you shared that information to continue on. And then not only sharing that information with continuing on, like you said, just wanted to just speak on my personal experience that the spirits, our divinities, and my own crowd just confirmed it by sharing people, places, and things with me, and also sharing that content, me, visualizing it in the content, and then also experiencing it in life, having it confirmed in life. So at first, I had a lot of people that I was a little bit upset with that didn't go along with me as far as with my journey, but then I started to realize that this journey really wasn't for everybody. It was actually for myself. So I just wanted to pay respect to that. I just wanted to show you appreciation and pay respect to that. And for the listeners that are out there, it's difficult. It was difficult for me to just gather my tongue because I had to readjust and reacquaint and reactivate my tongue to start saying some of our language, using some of our language. So the use of the books, I'm still new at learning it, but I'm old, and you just continue on learning more about your culture, just learning more about yourself, and it'll become a comfortable tongue for you. It'll become comfortable for you, and you'll start to connect with everything what's going on. It just takes time. It takes a lot of time for you to give out something. For you to take in something, you got to give out something. So you got to give up some of those old ways of thinking, those old monotheistic ways of thinking, and start taking in new ways so you can open yourself up to all your family. All right, that's all I got to say to that. Peace and love.
Merate, we really appreciate that information. And definitely, I'm sure that will, assist people because people are in similar positions. Some are beginning to move on that journey of self-discovery and sankofa, and sometimes, connecting with others who appear to be moving in the same direction, but then sometimes it may seem like later on they really weren't necessarily moving in the same direction, maybe feeling hindered to a certain extent. But like you said, it is about you reestablishing your own sense of self, grounding, focus, so you can move forward, and then you'll connect with those who you need to connect with. So we appreciate that confirmation. Okay, so we have a couple more calls, and then we're going to be done. Michio on the phone line, number 5466. You had a question or a comment?
The Camo, Brother Kwesi. Man, I tell you one thing, I can resonate with what that last brother said, especially about the language, because I learned like a couple languages, but none of them stuck. But dealing with the Medu, man, it's power in those words. First thing I want to say is I'm looking forward to being in D.C. in 2 weeks. I'm coming to the event you're throwing. But I had two questions. One of them should be real quick for you. I've been working my way through the Book of Gates. The joints, the Book of Gates, and then because, I see where you get your stuff. I'm going to go through the Book of the Heavenly Cow and all that next. But what's the etymology? Could you break the etymology down for Nehesi? They call the quote-unquote Nubians Nehesiu, and the term Rametu. Could you break down those terms for me?
Now, I heard you say the first one. Say the second one again.
How they call the Cometians, what's the term they use? Rametu, I believe. And the Nubians, they call Nubia Ta-Nehesi, and they call the people from Egypt Rametu.
Okay, so now if you look in the book Anidaho, one of our books, Anidaho, and the first one's talking about the origin of the term God, and we also showing that Nganga or Neg or doesn't mean nigger, and Naga. We talk about the origin of the term Naga. Then we have one of those articles says Negus Nkoso, and Negus is not nigger. That one, that term Nkoso, we go into the entire etymological and cosmological foundation of the term Nehesu or Nhetsu.
There it is.
In Akan. So the root of Nehesi or Nhes is Hes, but in Coptic it's Hos. In Akan, when you prefix the N, whether it's in ancient Kemet or ancient Kanat, you prefix the nasal N, the Hos becomes Hos, and Hos is the same in Akan as Nkoso, and it has to do with exploration and awakening and energy and so forth, awakening, exploratory energy. That's why it means to awaken in ancient Kemet. But it also means to ornament and to be ornamented. It's also a name of the Sudani form or the Kaniti or Nubian form of Het Heru and Kosu. This is why in the Akan tradition, one of the titles of the deity Atifi, who governs Friday and Venus, which is Het Heru, she's called Cheche in Akan, Het Her in ancient Kemet. She's also called Nkoso in Akan, because she's called Nkoso in ancient Kemet, or Nahasu. They would spell it Nehetsu in, the Egyptologists, but it's Nkosu, and we still call her Nkosu, and people who are born on that day Nkoso, because it has to do with exploration and innovation and all of that, but it also means divinely ornamented, bedecked, fully vested in accoutrements and all of that, like royalty. She's the divinity of beauty and art and all those different kinds of things. So we're going into some detail about that. And, of course, we're the first ones to show the origin of that term, Nkosu, and what it actually means, and we show the cosmological foundation and the etymological foundation associated with the same deity in both Kanat, Nubia, as well as Kemet, as well as the Akan tradition. Now, the second one, spell the second one because it sounded like you said Wametu, but I wasn't sure.
That was it, yeah. I mean, I'm in my car, so I'm coming off of memory right now. But that's it, Rametu. Is in they put RMT, and it has the YW.
Oh, you said Ramen. Okay,
for the plural. It's that YW at the end for plural, but it's pretty much like Rametu.
Okay, I thought you were using a W. No, you're saying R, like RMT, Ramet. Is that what you're saying? You're saying
man,
that?
I still got this American. I kept these American lips, man. you know what I'm saying.
Oh no, it's all right. No, so so what you'll see, even if you can look in two places. You can look in the late period text, so-called Nessie Min Papyrus, the Book of Knowing the Manifestations of Ra and the Overthrowing of Apep. Then you can look back in the Book of the Cow to Heaven, just so you can reference an earlier text and a late text. In the late text, it's really talking about, at that particular point, they're talking about Atem, and he says he didn't find a place where he could stand, and then he brought into his mouth his own name, and then he, brought forth, once he took his Kahibit as a wife and grasped her in his embrace, that's Asase Nebetetepet, and then Atem and Asase, they unite, and she gives birth to Shu and Tefnut, and then Shu and Tefnut give birth to Geb and Nut, and Geb and Nut give birth to Asar, Set, and Nebetet. And then they talk about the, multiple births that come after that. But they also talk about the divinity Rem, which is the form of an eye. The divinity Rem cries, and the teardrops from Rem, and the word for teardrops is Remu, meaning the teardrops that fell from the divinity of the eye Rem, and they became the Remu or the Remutu, which are the people. So that's in the late period text. The eye of Atem, which of course Atem is connected, operating as we talked about earlier, the consuming fire of the sun, Ra is that radiant fire, and Khepra is the explosive fire. So they're all operating within the same vessel, just like your heart and lungs are operating within the chest cavity, three different entities working together interdependently. So they're talking about the eye of Atem, which of course is also an aspect of the sun. But then you look in the earlier text, the book of the Cloud of Heaven, and when Ra's complaining that there are certain men and women who are, acting out and so forth, he says, look at these men and women who were brought into being by my eye, my Ari. So they came from the eye of Ra, talking about the Aten, which is the sun. And specifically, the solar energy that falls from the sun, the quote-unquote teardrops of the solar energy, the drops of solar energy that fall from the sun and fall into the quote-unquote earth, that life force energy that falls into the soil becomes fashioned by Kunwemu, the potter divinity, fashioning the body of the person on the divine potter's wheel, and also fashioning the Ka. But the divine life force energy is the Ba that takes up residence in that physical body, that animates and gives, animate energy within that physical body. That life force energy comes from the quote-unquote the sun, the Aten. That's a drop, a teardrop from the eye of Ra, a little drop of the solar light animating energy that falls within the physical body, the physical structure, so we can have animation. So we are the teardrops. We have a little Ba, a little spirit that comes from the great Ba. That's why Ra is called the great Ba. And Ra'ed is called the great Ba'et. They're the great spirit in creation. Ka and Ka is the great soul in creation, but Ra and Ra'ed is the divine living energy permeating and enlivening and animating all created entities. That's that life force, solar energy, heating up everything and enlivening everything. A little drop of that energy we can find within ourselves. Those are the teardrops. So they're the Remu, Remutu, and so forth, the teardrops that come from the eye of Ra. The deity, the eye itself is called Rem, and then you see the teardrops falling from Rem and tears are called Remu. When we talked about the origin of the human being, Onipa, and the origin of the human being, the term Ani means I, A-N-I, well, A-R-I, Ani, and then Anipa, that comes from Arim, which is R-E-M, Rim, Arim. That's that eye, and then the energy within the eye is the tears falling from the eye. So we go into some detail about that in that particular broadcast. Onipa and the creation of the human being. We did a broadcast on that, talking about the origin of the human being and also disposing of the foolishness of atheism and evolution and, all that nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Now, that was my easy question. You just opened up a whole nother thing, but I set that to the side. Now, my big question, more in line with what you were saying earlier, when you were talking about, I'm going to just say it the way it come out, the half-breeds, right, or the ones who have the blood of, in America, most of us are mixed to one extent. And this is one thing I noticed in various organizations I've been in. The light-skinned brothers tend to be more, most of them, not all, it's no exhaustive, there's no, alls here, but they tend to be real militant. I don't know if it's because they're trying to make up for the fact that they lighter, and then there's this other portion of brothers who be dreaded out, like some of my, brothers that was real, how can I put this? And the means they be real, militant, real hard talking brothers, but you go hang out with them and they got a juke or a roommate, you know what I'm saying? They constantly talking real heavy. So the question becomes everybody falls short. You know what I'm saying? I actually asked you this on Facebook, but I didn't know if you had a chance to answer it or not, because I come from a gang background, like most of us, Southside Chicago. And even the ones, you got ones that stayed on that path this whole time been gangbanging. And then you got brothers who from the Blackstone Nation went into the Nation of Islam, which, you know what I'm saying, it is what it is, man. That's not the right path either. And so what I actually said was I never felt either one of them was a home. You know what I'm saying? The gangs obviously ain't no home. The Nation of Islam, following that Arab ain't really no home. The Christian church ain't no home. Very few people, in all honesty, from what I'm seeing, have found their way home. So, and from me being somebody that's concerned about the group, I worry about my cousins, I worry about my brothers, I worry about my homies. do you truly see redemption for us? Is it a way to get them out? I talked to him. Like, matter of fact, I seen my uncle. My uncle got into a motorcycle accident. Went to go see the family in Chicago. And one of my cousins, he just graduated to be a Christian minister or something like that. And I was laying them down about the ecumenical councils and that nonsense and how they, put the books on the floor. Whichever books found their way onto the table was the books that they put in the Bible, and the Crusades, and how they used those to wipe out all of the, how these political movements became religious things when they never really had any spirituality in them. So I do what I can to talk to the fam, but what can we do? Is there redemption for the group, or is it just going to be the small circle of people that's just trying to get out of this cycle?
No, I understand. That's a good question. No, it's redemption for the masses. And we have the capacity, just like, Christians are, they got millions of people. Of course, they have the backing of the whites and their offspring and the propaganda and everything. Even groups like the Nation of Islam were able to sweep through certain segments of the population and pull people in because they showed them something that looked like Christianity. And then they did a little head fake and changed a few names and, feel like they're into something different, but they're not. But our people do want to get out of these things, but they were never presented with something that was sensible. Even when they were given something that had to do with ancestral culture, very often it was either, oh, you're dependent on going to Nigeria, Ghana, or Cuba or somewhere else to get your culture and get, named and taught by somebody else and bring it in. Or people are talking about extraterrestrials and all kinds of stupidity, or you have to embrace the whites and their offspring, or, homosexuality, or spending all this money, all this stupidity. And they're like, well, these Negroes don't know what they're talking. They're just as idiotic as the Christians and the Muslims and everybody else. They've never been presenting with their ancestral religious traditions born of their blood circles here in the Western Hemisphere that they have access to simply because they have ancestors and they can engage that process immediately directly from their own family. And that's their nature. So they've never been shown that until now. And that's what enlivens people, because they realize they have a tradition. They have an ancestral religion that's thousands of years old from the beginning of creation, that's within their blood circle, within their genes, within their DNA, within their spirit genetic blood circle that they have access to instantaneously, and they can feel it because the Nsamanfo are walking with them on a regular basis. So we have that capacity, we have that infrastructure, and that's one of the reasons we're having a conference, is to begin to expand that reach, because we have that infrastructure in place. So not only do we see the redemption, the blueprint is already laid out. All we have to do is walk in the steps of that blueprint and collect the vast majority of our people, which is happening and will happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, I see them. They in their feelings. The family is in their feelings. I got one cousin that's just got ordained. I got another cousin that approached me talking about Buddhism, and I'm like, you know what I'm saying? Well, you talking about that Hindu Kush bloodline? Like, we ain't got no bloodlines over there, family. You need to be, looking at what your ancestors was doing. That's where your strength is. But everybody in their feelings. You know what I mean? Everybody's emotionally attached to these cults. They're emotionally attached to these things that have actually held them back. And I came to the realization that we was lied to as kids, and so many people have spent their entire lives trying to, like it don't take long to lie to somebody. I can make up some shit, if you don't mind me saying that, right now, and if I have enough, political power behind me, they write that in enough books, 20 years from now, it'll be the truth, but then somebody would take their entire life just to prove that one lie wrong. That's how amazing and powerful a lie can be. It's amazing, man.
Right. And the key is people up until now, until we, for example, released the Kuku Tuntun, even in the community, they come up with this approach to dealing with Christians and Muslims and others like, well, we'll never be able to pull them out of the churches and the mosques, so we need to work with them where they are. We don't want to offend their religion. We'll just figure out a way to talk about other things and not just, building this foolish approach rooted in their impotence in the face of the whites and their offspring. We don't have that impotence. We've proven that these characters don't exist. Our people are not used to people saying, listen, Jesus never existed and we can prove it. Muhammad never existed. We have the evidence. Buddha never existed. Buddha comes from Ptah. This is who Ptah is. This is where they got Buddha from. Muhammad is the waters of the northern Nile. Nobody was ever able to tell people that until we released that information. So for the past, number of decades, the nationalists and Pan-Africanists didn't have any method to get our people out of it. So they created this whole approach of not getting our people out of the most self-destructive behaviors imaginable, which are these fake religions. If we don't deal with the fake religions, nothing we do politically is going to work. And they've been avoiding the number one thing that we need to be focused on. So that's why we are rooted in ancestral religious reversion and then building nationism from that firm foundation. That's the reason we're having a conference, to move forward in that direction.
Calmo, brother. I'm going to go hit up my shrine before, wash and hit my shrine, and I appreciate the conversation.
Okay, Medate, we appreciate
you. Peace.
Yeah. Okay, so we have one last call before we're in overtime, but it's going to cut off in a few minutes, so we have one last call we can take. Number 8977, you had a question or a comment?
Yes, Shimo, brothers. Quickly, I just, because I've been listening to a lot of the recordings and on Blog Talk, basically. And I just want a clarification on when you say the Odwirafo and the whites and their offspring, and white Asians, white Native Americans, white Hispanics, white. What are we referring to? Are we referring to those people of those ethnicities that with no melanin? What actually are we referring to?
So what we're talking about is the difference between, like, for example, you'll see some black people, like you have, of course, black people in America, black people on the continent in different places. You can have black people who live in Cuba, and they'll call them Afro-Cuban, or you have black people living in, like Sammy Sosa, well, used to be Sammy Sosa before he started bleaching himself. But, so we have our people, quote-unquote Afro-Latinos. Those are our people. They're people who came from the continent, and they ended up in these places. They were forced to speak Spanish, just like we were forced to speak English. So our people are, in different parts of the world. Now, those white Hispanics, those are not our people. Those white Latinos and Latinos, those are not our people. They are not us. We are not them. We're not united. These are our enemies. These are spirits of disorder. Even though they have a little tan skin, you know what I'm saying, that they're descendants of Eurasians. They are typically descendants of Eastern Eurasians, and then the Europeans are Western Eurasians. And then, of course, some of them have polluted our blood through war and everything like that, so some of them may be a little bit more tan. Some of them may have a little bit more features towards, you know what I'm saying, but we know the differences physically but also spiritually. So spiritually, they do not have a Ka or a Kayat. So whether it's a white Arab, a white Hindu. So you have black people in India who are black and have naturally curly hair, like people on the continent, people in the Andaman Islands and the Sentinelese, and the people in the southern part of the continent, subcontinent of India and so forth. But then you have those white Aryans who invaded. The further you get south, the more dark they get, but then the average Hindu, tannish brown and so forth, like Quickie Mart, 7-Eleven type Hindu. Those are not our people.
I'm sorry, who was that? You gave a
like those who, work in 7-Eleven and stuff like that. These are descendants of those white Aryans who polluted the blood of our people. They produced a mulatto class, and they have reincarnated through that mulatto class as the same white spirits of disorder that don't have a Ka or Kayat, who are operating through a little light tan body with black hair. But those are not our people.
Because I often see some Eastern Indian people that are blacker than me and wonder. I have a curiosity about those people. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, some of our people still live there, and they're oppressed. Some of them, they call them the Dalit, the untouchables and all of that, and they treat them, very negatively. So some of our people are still there, and they're being horribly oppressed over there. It's like they have the Dalit Panther Party that they, named after the Black Panther Party here in America because they're fighting for their justice over there. So, and most of them typically don't get a chance. They don't have the funds to get over here. The people from India that we typically see are the descendants of white Aryans who created the mulatto class. They're the ones who typically can go back and forth. The black ones normally don't have the funds to get over here, so we hardly ever see them. Every now and then you may see one, but most of the time we don't get a chance to see them. We only see the criminal class that comes over here, to exploit and do the things that they're doing. But some of our people are still over there.
But just because they have dark skin doesn't necessarily mean that they have a ka. Is what I want to understand. And I mean, because you also mentioned like Native Americans, because we can look at photos or drawings or whatever from Native Americans from way back in the day, and they just as black as we are, as opposed to the Native Americans that we see today.
Right, and then they throw those terms around for confusion. So they'll have, some of the earliest pictures you find, of course, would be, as far as photos, would be from the so-called 1800s when they first developed cameras. And then you have some earlier drawings and things like that and descriptions. But what happens is, of course, you had, those Asians who came over here. Originally, the first people to come over here, of course, was our people before Asians existed on Earth. And before any other group existed on Earth, before they came into being, we had already migrated around the world tens of thousands of years ago. So we had people over here, and we were the exact same people. We migrated from the continent and moved over here. We didn't spring up out of the soil in the Western Hemisphere. We migrated here, and we settled here just like we settled in Southern Europe and the so-called Near East and India and everywhere else. Much later on, thousands of years later, then these Eurasians start coming. You have Western Eurasians, which are Europeans, then Eastern Eurasians, which are, Chinese and Siberians and everybody else. And they're coming over here. When they get over here, they encountered us. So, of course, they started waging war against us. They weren't always successful, but they were waging war against our people. Western Europeans come hundreds of years later. But one thing that they brought that was, quote-unquote, successful, but they brought it incidentally, was their filthy diseases from Europe, like smallpox and other diseases. And the plague hit North America as well as Central and South America, just like it hit, the bubonic plague hit Europe. And very often we don't study the plagues that hit ancient America. We study the bubonic plague in Europe where, they were wiped out. Nearly one half the population was wiped out in Europe in 5 years. Dead bodies piled up all over Europe because of the plague. So the same plague hit here. So when the Europeans came, and they would say there were entire villages, dead bodies everywhere, rotting bodies and so forth, and they were able to take over these villages because everybody was dying, and the virus preceded them and hit the villages and spread rapidly before they got a chance to ride their horses over there. So they can pretend like they, slayed and conquered everybody, but, when you read their actual writings at the time, they'll talk about the carnage and the death and the sores all over the bodies and all these people dying, and the healers were not able to get to everybody because it was so, it moved through like a fire and everything. So our people were being wiped out by these diseases. Now you have these Asians who were, some of them still here, but they weren't strong enough to, get cotton and do all that kind of stuff and do that, tobacco and stuff like that. They're dying in the fields and everything else. So then you'll see when the, Catholics and the other people saying, hey, we need to start bringing people from the continent, because they're skilled in rice growing and everything else. But then at the same time, they can work in these fields and everything else, so they would go over there. Some of our people were at war with one another. They would purchase the captive, the prisoners of war, and bring our people over here. that's the reason why that large population of our people was wiped out before our people started being brought over here. So people don't typically understand and study the plagues that wiped out the indigenous black population over here, and which had to be replaced.
Because they say that it was the Native Americans, and in the minds of people, it's the Native Americans that we see, today, or, the lighter Native Americans. We're not necessarily thinking in terms of it being an actual black people that was wiped out because
right,
of the
because by that point, by the time the Western Europeans came over here, they started coming over here in the so-called 1400s. They encountered the Asians, the light-skinned Asians, and Columbus will talk about that. We'll talk about when he talked to the Asians, and they were like, the Asians told him, these migrant Asians, misnomer Native Americans, they told him, hey, there's some black people over here as well, and they got the spears, and they had the same metal alloys that they sold in Guinea and everything else. And he saw some of the black ones over there, and he was like, oh, how did they get over here before we got it? You know what I'm saying? So they knew that some of our people were over here. They encountered more so these Asians because the plagues had already begun to a certain extent in certain areas, like the Hansa virus, which is indigenous over here, but then the Europeans brought their filth over here as well. So those things had already started, and they just started picking up in the 1500s and everything else. So they came in contact with both groups, like the black Caribs and then the quote-unquote white Caribs and other groups. But then because those Europeans came over here and those viruses really started spreading like wildfire, that wiped out. And even when they talk about the plagues in ancient America, they talk about the population being reduced to like by 95%. Just mass, and we're not used to thinking about mass deaths like that because we haven't lived through that kind of plague in the past 100 years. People are not, they don't know what that looks like. But can you imagine, like 285 million Americans dying in the next 5 years, almost the whole population dropping dead. That's what happened.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, and the Europeans were over here. They had a few little Asians. They're not going to be able to, generate the kind of wealth they want to generate on plantations. They were like, we have to start bringing Afro-Akani people over here to repopulate, and that's what they started doing.
Okay. Well, that helps me out a lot. It helps me out a lot because I do wonder when I see some people that have some color to them, if that is significant. But I also take into consideration the fact that, the incarnation of people, and it really only matters if there's an ancestral spirit that comes through the womb, rather than, how dark a person is.
Exactly. Because you could have somebody looking like Mariah Carey, she either came from the father's side and one of his people, or she's one of her people. She's super light, you know what I'm saying? So if she came from his side, she's just really polluted, but she was forced to operate through that polluted body, but she's still one of those ancestresses from his side, one of his great-grandmothers. But if she came from the white mother's side, then she's one of them.
I have in mind, especially in terms of Eastern Indian, and only because I find this person very comical, Mindy Kaling, and she's darker than I am, but she displays disordered character. Do you understand what I'm saying? But she's darker than I am. So in that instance, I'm thinking even if they're as dark as me, that's not the significance. Isn't in the darkness. It's in whether that person is. Help me out, bro.
Right. If that person has a ka or a kada or not, meaning they're a spiritual disorder or not.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay.
Very helpful. Thank you so much.
We appreciate the call.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the last call. We're going to end it here. We'll be back on tomorrow night for Egua Marketplace. Again, you can take advantage of the 5 books for $40 as part of our fundraising effort. All of our conferences are free, and all of our presentations, when we go to different cities just to do our presentations, we always make sure that no one is charging admissions fee. That's our policy, and we do give away a free book to everyone who comes to the event, and we've given away over 860 free books. We're going to keep that program going. The way we're able to do that is through the sales of our books here, as well as support from the community. So if you would like to support the work that we are doing, you can go to the publications page now, NHOMA page on our website, NHOMA, NHOMA page on the website. You can take advantage of the 5 books for $40, and you can choose any 5 books. You don't have to just pick the first 5. You can put in the comment section which of the 5 books you would like to receive, and we can definitely accommodate that, or any of the other books you would like to purchase that assists us in what we're doing. So, again, Yedase, we thank you for tuning in to the broadcast, and Yebesha Bio, we will meet again.